Hi, I'm Brad and I'm a firefighter at Guildford Fire Station.
And I'm Andy, I'm a firefighter at Chertsey Fire Station. And we are your hosts for Safe Drive Stay Alive 2020. Since 2005, we've brought in over 10,000 students a year to Dorking Halls for this event. But due to COVID, that's just not possible. So instead, we're bringing Safe Drive Stay Alive to you live and online from Guildford Fire Station. If you're watching this, then you're either driving already, learning to drive, or approaching driving age. The chances are you're already a passenger in cars driven by other new drivers. Getting your license is a really exciting time and offers loads of new opportunities, but it also comes with risks and responsibilities. And that is why it's so important for us to bring Safe Drive Stay Alive to you this year.
Now you are officially classed as a young driver, there's some stuff that you should know. Those aged 17 to 24 total only 8% of driving licence holders, but account for 20% of those killed or seriously injured on the roads. And drivers aged between 17 and 19, that's you, hold just 1.5% of driving licences, yet represent 9% of all drivers killed or seriously injured every year.
The vast majority of road traffic collisions, deaths and injuries are caused by driver error, not mechanical failures. These errors include things like using a mobile phone, driving too fast, drink or drug driving, not wearing a seatbelt, and driving when you're tired. If you want to avoid being one of the 20% that are killed or seriously injured on the roads, the key is to make better choices. And that's why we're here today. So, on that note, I'd like to hand you over to vlogger and musician Harry Seaton, who's going to explain how you could win one of 30 great prizes exclusively for Safe Drive Stay Alive Surrey 2020.
Hi everyone, my name's Harry Seaton, I'm a YouTuber and I'd like to welcome you to Safe Drive Stay Alive Surrey. Before the main part of the performance, there's just enough time for me to tell you how you can sign up for some great driving and road safety advice and also how you can win some great prizes just by being here today. We've got 4 car insurance discount vouchers, each worth £250, 6 great dash cams and 20 £30 Amazon gift cards. And they can only be won by you, members of the audience here at SDSA Surrey. So to enter, get your phone out, do it right now, it's only going to take about 30 seconds, and then text the word WIN to 87222. You'll receive a text back, it's going to ask for your email address, so reply to that, giving it your email address, and that's it, you're entered and you could win one of the prizes. Remember, this competition is actually only open to members of the audience here at Safe Drive Stay Alive Surrey, so your odds of winning are actually really good. Okay, I'm off now, but you can catch me on YouTube, just search Harry Seaton, or don't, but whatever you do, safe drive and stay alive.
If you can't message us right now, then please remember to text WIN to 87222 at the end, when we'll give you this number again. We're also going to hit you back with a link to this performance so you can leave us your comments. Now, I want to stress that the people we're going to introduce to you today are not actors. They are either serving members of Surrey's emergency services or people whose lives have been directly affected by a road traffic collision. Andy and I hope that by listening to them share their experiences, that you make good, safe choices and stay safe.
Now, remember what Brad told you earlier about the number of young drivers killed or seriously injured across the UK. If we look more locally, in Surrey between 2005 and 2009, this represents on average how many young drivers were killed or seriously injured each year: 49.
But in the last 5 years, there has been almost 50% fewer young driver deaths and serious injuries. Andy and I believe that's because young people like you have been listening and taking notice of the messages at Safe Drive Stay Alive. This reduction is positive, but we must go further. So, if you can act on what you'll hear today, then together we can push down the numbers of casualties and deaths even further. I'll be upfront with you, what you're about to see might not be easy to watch, but it is a necessary wake-up call for the responsibilities you carry every time you get into a car, both as a driver and as a passenger.
When we found out that we were having a child, we just wanted to tell the whole world. And when he arrived, it was our dream.
Say hi to Daddy. All right, James. Looking at the camera. He's a natural, isn't he?
It's a feeling that every parent must have of how on earth did we create that?
Wow. Oh, kisses.
As a young child, James loved the aspect of creation, of something that didn't exist. He loved a blank sheet of paper, and then he'd just attack it.
Oh, hello, it's me. Son, can you look at the camera and smile for your daddy? Oh, what a good boy.
When he was a little bit older, we discovered that wheelbarrows could actually have a dual purpose of being a racing cart. And so we would race around the garden to the squeals of delight. It was a marvellous time in their lives where we were a complete unit.
Now do it with the other hand. Whoops. James, I said be careful. You better go find it.
The involvement with his siblings was extraordinary in that he was the leader of the pack, and he then passed that on to his brothers and sisters.
I want to see Paige get a few more houses. Come on, Paige.
Come on. Down.
I saw quite a lot of myself in him as he grew into a teenager. And that lovely time of teaching how to perfect things, how to get it right, and then watch him practice and watch his enjoyment of things that we've actually managed to pass on.
Might be a bit embarrassing for me.
How long we got?
It was tremendous to become friends as opposed to just the parent, and to listen to him. He was learning the practicalities of life and living. He phoned us at about 10 o'clock and he said, "Could you leave a key out because I'm going to be late?" We all went to bed with the anticipation that at some stage in the night I would hear a rumbling in the house and know that he'd arrived. At about 4:20, we were woken by a large knocking on the door. You've been sound asleep, everything is fine, the family's all safe, everything's great, and then something is wrong with this incessant bang, 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 bang. I opened the door saying the key's where we left it, and there was a policeman standing there. And when they actually told us, it didn't sink in. It's too big. How? How could a young man with that vitality be no more? He had hit the crash barrier and went straight into the pillar in the middle of the bridge, the impact of which ignited the car. His ability to be able to, I think, include everybody within the room, within his sphere. He had an ability to be able to look out for everybody else and still have a fantastic time himself. I would give everything away to have him back.
As a young person, it may be difficult to imagine what it would be like to answer your front door and have a police officer deliver to you the most devastating news, like Nick. And it doesn't end on the doorstep. I want you to think about everything and everyone that you would miss and leave behind if you were to never to come home. Your family, friends, boyfriends, girlfriends. Our next speaker is a police officer called Steve. And he knows only too well what it means to deliver that devastating news. Within his role, he attends collisions, and it is his task to tell families that their loved ones are never coming home.
My name is Steve, and I'm a police officer with Surrey Police. I've been a police officer for 21 years. My current role is that as a casualty reduction officer. Now, casualty reduction officers are responsible for ensuring the safe usage of our roads by tackling the fatal five. The fatal five are known as drink or drug driving, driving whilst not wearing a seatbelt, driving whilst using a handheld mobile phone, driving whilst distracted and without due care and attention, and excess speed. Part of my role entails speed enforcement. Now, speed is not the cause of a collision, but it is the one determining factor that will indicate how severe that collision will be. Collisions are primarily caused by three factors, namely vehicle defect, road defect, or human error. I'd like to share with you some stories both in my professional career and my personal life that I have dealt with through my time. We all have dates in our lives that are memorable, and for me, some of those dates are memorable, but not for the right reasons. When I was 14 years of age, I was cycling home from my secondary school with two of my friends. As we've set off from school, we've cycled along the road and we have turned left onto a road, and one of my friends has stopped and said, "You two go on ahead, I'll catch you up." My other friend and I have continued cycling and we've turned left. And as we've gone onto this road, we've then negotiated a line of two parked cars either side of the road. Now, as we've done so, we've seen another vehicle coming towards us. Now, this vehicle had slowed down to allow my friend and I to safely pass. As I did so, I looked over my shoulder to see my third friend, who had originally stopped and told us to go on ahead, cycling at speed, trying to catch us up. As I've gone through the parked cars, the vehicle that had slowed down to allow us to come through has then begun to accelerate. At this point, I've heard a blood-curdling scream, and I've looked over my shoulder to see my friend being catapulted up in the air and landing about 30 to 40 feet away. I've stopped, I've gone over to help him and to see what condition he's in, and he laid there still on the road with blood pouring from his cycle hat. He was unresponsive, he couldn't communicate. Now, I was a child when this happened. I was 14 years of age. I had no idea what to do. Neighbours thankfully came out and they called for an ambulance, and we got the emergency services to help us. Now, I'm going to fast forward 3 years into the future, and I'm now 17 years of age. My other friend that had been with me that day, out of the set of three, was now riding a motorcycle. On a cold winter's morning, he has been on his motorcycle, travelling down a road, and he was travelling at speed. What has happened is he has then lost control of his motorcycle, with his front wheel losing traction over a manhole cover, and he has hit a concrete lamppost and split his crush helmet straight down in the middle. He died instantly. So when I was 14 years of age, I have lost two of my friends to road traffic collisions and incidents, and I thought, one is now severely disabled, and the other one has died. That left me. Now, my friend that was involved in the pedal cycle collision when I was 14 now relies on a specialist device to speak. It's called a light writer, and he has to type out every single word. He needs help with bathing, he needs help with feeding, he needs help with all personal care. He will never be able to walk again. He is wheelchair bound for the rest of his life, and he will always need someone to care for him. As a result of what happened to me when I was 14, I personally felt, as my friend is disabled, my other friend is dead, that left me. I wanted to do something extremely worthwhile with my life, which is why I joined the police service. I remember one late shift in the afternoon, I was at Egham Police Station when we hear a noise on the radio of a road traffic collision involving a pedal cyclist and a motorcyclist. Now, as soon as I've heard that, these memories came flooding back to me. So my colleague and I have left Egham Police Station, and it was literally on the road outside. As we've gone out the station, we've approached and we've seen the level crossing barriers down. I've got out the car, my colleague has gone to go and tend to the motorcyclist. I've then gone to go and try and offer help and assistance to the pedal cyclist. Now, the pedal cyclist I then discovered was a 12-year-old boy. As I looked at him and called out his name and tried to get a response, he was motionless. He too was bleeding heavily. I started CPR, and with every single chest compression that I did, more blood was oozing from his body. I tried my absolute hardest to save that young lad's life, but unfortunately, that wasn't to be. As a result of myself being one of the first attending officers on the scene, I got asked to go and pass the news of what's happened to his family. Now, to go and have to tell someone that their son, their daughter, their brother or sister will not be coming home, and especially with such a young age, is absolutely heartbreaking. No police officer ever wants to have to deliver that news. And as soon as a police officer walks up to an address, and it's normally not to be expected, and they are quite sombre and they are quite quiet in their approach, people automatically presume it's going to be bad news. I informed the parents of what happened, and with those words, their world absolutely shattered. Now, we want you to enjoy yourselves when you are out there and driving, but we also want you to do so in a safe manner. So please remember that not everyone has the opportunity to grow old, and to grow old is not a right, it is an absolute privilege. So please, safe drive, stay alive.
They called the passenger seat the death seat. I was in the passenger seat and Lee was in the driver's seat. Lee wasn't wearing a seatbelt. We both flew forward. I hit my head on the windscreen. Lee hit the steering wheel. That killed Lee instantly. He then fell on top of me. The car set alight. The fire actually started underneath my seat. I was in the burning car for at least 5 or 6 minutes before the fire service attended the scene. Once the fire service did get there, they obviously tried to put the flames out. They pulled my friend out of the car first. Straight away realised there was no signs of life. They didn't even realise that I was in the car at the first. Thought I was dead. I could see my finger just twitch. Everything was set towards getting me out of the car. I just can't understand why I survived.
You've been so patient.
I still feel guilt. Why have I survived and Lee hasn't?
Good work, let's keep going. This one's good. Right, last cut, grab hands on the car.
Are you there?
Hands in front, ready, brace, move. Good work.
Really well, all right.
Okay, roof's clear, let's get the sharps covered up.
Okay, and get you
We
back
move on
into
to other
that ambulance,
case. Clear, I'll get the longboard ready.
I've got 45% full thickness burns. When I actually got taken into hospital's burns unit, they thought that I was a 40 to 50-year-old man.
Like anyone learning a new skill, young drivers will make mistakes, but the speed at which you make that mistake can have a major effect on the outcome. It can be the difference between a near miss and a collision. It is the speed limit, not the target. Keep a 2-second gap between yourself and the vehicle in front of you. In the wet, that needs to be 4 seconds. Now, I don't know if you know this, but As a car driver, if you strike the rear of a vehicle in front of you, you will always be found at fault, meaning that you're going to have to claim on your car insurance. And I think that's going to be expensive enough as it is. As we will hear from Rachel, our next speaker, she is a firefighter in Surrey. Speed isn't necessarily the main cause of a road traffic collision, but it is often a major contributing factor.
Hi, my name's Rachel. I've been an operational firefighter for 17 years. During this time, I've been to many road traffic collisions, some of which I've been amazed at how lucky people have been to walk away with cuts and bruises. Then of course you have the more serious incidents, the ones where people aren't quite so lucky, the ones that stay with you, that you never forget. One incident I went to occurred at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was on the M25. We were called to a road traffic collision, 1 lorry, 1 minibus. As we drove along the motorway, we could see on the other carriageway, in lane 1, an Arctic lorry and what looked like to be a minibus into the back of it. When we arrived at the scene, crews from Epsom were already there. It was clear to see that the minibus was on the back of a recovery vehicle, and that vehicle had been trapped underneath the back of the lorry. Before we could do anything, help any casualties, we had to remove the vehicle from under that lorry. Once this had been achieved, we could start looking for any signs of life. The cab of the recovery vehicle was so squashed you couldn't tell that there were 2 rows of seats in the cab. Myself and another firefighter were tasked with removing the windscreen. As we did this, we were faced with the reality of 1 casualty and 6 lifeless people in the cab, with a pool of blood filling the footwells and running out onto the carriageway. We worked for what seemed like hours, trying to release that only survivor. He was trapped behind the driver's seat, and once he had been removed, he'd go off to hospital. The other casualties in that vehicle would be left in situ, waiting for the coroner to pronounce them dead and waiting for the police to complete an investigation of what had happened. And still, their families didn't know where they were. 6 people died that night. 5 of them were friends, 1 the driver of the recovery vehicle. The 1 friend that survived suffered life-changing injuries. These guys didn't do anything wrong that night. They were returning home from a stag weekend and their vehicle broke down. They called for recovery. Unfortunately, what they didn't know was that the recovery driver would lose concentration due to being too tired, having cannabis in his blood system, and drive this vehicle underneath the lorry, killing those people's lives. The scene of a road traffic collision is nothing like you can imagine. Despite the number of people, the noise from the sirens and the equipment, it has an eerie silence to it. For me, I'll never forget the sights I saw that night. The 1 survivor who was trapped whilst his friends lay next to him dead. There isn't a photograph, a YouTube clip, movie or computer game that can ever really portray the true devastation of a road traffic collision. Please always think about who you're getting in a vehicle with. Are they fit to drive? If you're worried, don't get in their vehicle. Safe drive, stay alive.
I don't remember the crash. There wasn't off-duty paramedic. She was the first on scene. She saved my life.
So we just need to make sure everything's all right for you.
Because I never wore a seatbelt, my brain stem got twisted, so it gives me a weak side like a stroke.
Okay, just calm down for
When I was 16, I could not wait to learn to drive. My car crash was the worst day of my life. I shouldn't have survived.
After watching that, I'm sure that you now understand the importance of knowing who your driver is and if they are safe to drive. If you're the driver, make sure that you put the safety of your passengers first. The consequences could be just like those described by our firefighter Rachel. The police can now drug test you on the side of the road just like they do for drink driving, and the penalties are exactly the same. If you are over the limit, you will be disqualified from driving. If you are unfortunate enough to be involved in a road traffic collision, our next speaker might be the first person that you see. His name is James and he is a paramedic with CCAM.
My name is James Armstrong and I'm a paramedic with the South East Coast Ambulance Service. 7 years ago, I was an audience member at Safe Drive and I remember thinking how this would never affect me. I want to tell you about my experiences with road traffic collisions that I've had in my time with the ambulance service. I remember on my training course how we were told that the blood, guts and trauma that you expect from TV programmes like Casualty doesn't really happen, that a lot of the job is routine and perhaps even boring. So, on a cold December night, the call that came through was to shock me more than anything I'd been to before. When the job came through, it simply read RTC, or road traffic collision. One patient, male, unknown age, query breathing. The stretch of road that it was on, we know well in the ambulance service. It's a bit of a hotspot for RTCs. And as we pulled up, we could just about see a car buried in some woods. I recall a member of the public coming to meet me. He said, "My friend is with the bloke and he is still breathing, we think." As I approached the car, I looked in towards the driver's seat and couldn't see anything. Starting to look in the back of the car, the two members of the public shouted at me, "No mate, he's in the front, look down." So, shining the torch through the driver's door and looking down, I saw him, slumped forward and to the left. Quickly realising that his breathing was not normal, we made the decision to rapidly remove him from the car. I realised at this point that he had embedded his forehead onto the gear stick. We pulled him out of the driver's door and dragged him out of the wooded ditch that he was in. One of the guys who'd found him at this point just turned around and started throwing up at the side of the road. The sight in front of him had just been too much. I remember as I tried to establish his airway, just looking down at this disfigured face that no longer resembled a man. He had a big hole right in the centre of his forehead. We quickly had support from the ambulance helicopter. Now normally, when they arrive, you kind of get this sense of hope that maybe the advanced skills from the doctor will provide the treatment required to give the patient a chance. We gave him some fluid and blood, but just as quick as we were putting it all in, it was coming back out as we did the chest compressions. After around an hour of us working on him, I remembered the doctor saying, "I think, team, we need to make a decision here that is difficult. This gentleman has had everything we can give him. I feel that there is nothing more that we can do and that these injuries are incompatible with life." As a team, we all knew that we had given him everything. All our options had been exhausted, and so the doctors declared him dead at 23:23 that night. It's a strange atmosphere afterwards. No one really knows what to say or do. We just kind of start tidying up our equipment, making sure that we preserve what the police need. It's then that you start to notice the details, the type of car it is, the clothing you've cut off, the items around the car. The collision investigator explained how his initial impression was that the driver, our patient, had lost control whilst negotiating a right-hand bend, how the car had hit the ditch and been propelled around 5 feet up in some trees before crashing back down further down the road. He pointed out dents visible in the trees above. He didn't feel speed was an issue that night, just a lack of road experience. It was only after we'd finished that I found out that the patient was 18, pretty much my age. It was obvious from the items in the car that he'd been at work that day. It was just a normal day that had ended in tragedy. A life gone a few weeks before Christmas. A family that would never have a Christmas with him again. I remember when I passed my driving test, just before starting this job, how invincible I felt at the wheel. How I sat here, listening to this presentation, thinking that this would never affect me. Now I realise just how easily all of that could go wrong. Thank you for listening, and please remember, safe drive, stay alive.
The most common question I get asked from my friends and my family is, what's it like being in a coma? And the only way I can describe it is the deepest sleep you will ever have. After the operations, the consultant and the surgeon said to my parents that there was nothing more that they could do. Everything had been done, so it was just up to my body and the drugs. The driver lost control of the car and spun and hit a large tree on the back left-hand side of the car, which was where I was sat. Whilst I was in a coma, my lungs collapsed, and during that time I contracted pneumonia, MRSA and meningitis. So I had these massive tubes going into my throat, keeping my lungs working, giving me oxygen. I had tubes in my foot, my ankle and around my neck, feeding me and keeping me hydrated, and further tubes giving me the drugs necessary to keep me in a coma.
You do need to take it day by day, see how it goes.
I understand.
For my parents seeing their 18-year-old son in this state, I'm sure it's an image that they will always remember. And thinking about that helps me try and appreciate just how serious this must have been. When they first attempted to bring me out of the coma, due to the huge amount of drugs that was being poured into my body, it was just not ready to come out. So I was going through phases of anger and through phases of crying and not being able to control my emotions, my limbs even. All the tubes that were all over my body, I was ripping them out. I was pulling the tubes out my wrists. And so they put me back into the coma. And then when they tried to bring me out again, it was the same situation.
Still on the ventilator.
Okay, is he breathing for himself at all? Is he making any effort?
As of yet, no.
You're in this state whereby you're completely vulnerable and in demand of everyone around you, helping you get back to even half of where you were before in terms of speaking and talking and walking, and even simple things like recognising your friends and your family and being able to look around and process the information of where you are and who you are. And what made it even worse was I couldn't even communicate to the hospital experts or my family that I was struggling. What felt like yesterday, I was able to play golf, play tennis, play rugby, and then all of a sudden I couldn't even tie my shoelaces. Although the coma was 3 lost weeks of my life, it's far more than just those 3 weeks. The last 5 years have been an ongoing battle.
So as we've heard from James, our paramedic, sometimes a lack of experience is all it can take to cause a road traffic collision. But it's important that you realise, as new drivers, that you need to build on your experience. You might need to practice something. Now, when I first passed, I spent a morning going around the M25 with my parents to make sure that I was happy before I put myself and my friends in that vehicle together. Your experience will come over time, but until then, the single most important thing you can do is to make good choices. And as we will hear from our next speaker, Magda, those good choices can be the difference between life and death.
Hello, my name is Magda and I'm a nurse. I've worked in the emergency department for over 17 years, both in Surrey and in London. And I can stand here and I can tell you many a gory story from all my experiences of road traffic collisions over those 17 years. The broken, dislocated bones, the deep gushing wounds, the amputated limbs, collapsed or blood-filled lungs. But for me, anyway, that's the easiest stuff to deal with. We know what to do, we can clean it up, fix it, make it better. It's the emotional aspects, dealing with traumatic deaths, injuries, patients or situations that we can relate to as healthcare professionals, and witnessing the impact of death and serious injuries on relatives. I have a memory full of other people's tragedies, witnessing the worst few hours of their lives. None of us working in the emergency services are immune. My job has taught me that life is just so very precious and fragile. I just want to share with you one of those tragedies. She was an outgoing and happy and vibrant 18-year-old girl who had only just recently passed her driving test and had found out that she'd done amazingly well in her A-levels, and she had gone out for drinks to celebrate with her friends from college. But of course she did not touch a drop of alcohol because she was driving. After the drinks had finished, she got into her car, she put her phone on the passenger seat, and on her way home, driving, the phone rang. She looked at her phone and she thought about it, but decided not to answer it. But in those seconds where she wasn't concentrating on the road, she didn't see the traffic lights turn from green to amber to red. A family was crossing that road, and she went straight into a 2-year-old child who was literally crossing the road 3 foot in front of his mother and his baby sister in a pushchair. And he came into A&E, and we tried everything for hours, every drug intervention, anything and everything that we possibly could, we tried. But we had to stop. He was dead. And then came the harsh, the worst part, telling his mum. I mean, what do you say? How could her child, who is otherwise very well, never been in hospital, not even seen the GP, who this morning was happy watching Peppa Pig eating his breakfast, be gone, no longer here? There is no medication, no treatment, no words, no nothing that could make that any better. So I ask you, what could ever be more important than concentrating on the road? If you have your phone, put it in the glove compartment, put it on silent, just put it away, put it in your bag so you can't see it, you can't get distracted by it. And as for that girl, I mean, she has to live for the rest of her life knowing that she killed a child. I mean, could you live with that? Could you? Because I know I couldn't. And none of us are saying don't drive. Driving is amazing. Just be clear that driving does have, or your actions have, dramatic consequences, and some can be absolutely catastrophic. Driving is a privilege. Be aware, be safe, plan your journey. But most of all, please, safe drive and stay alive. Thank you.
Is the age where everything's happening and everything's exciting, and I was kind of half a part of that, and then obviously feeling that my life had kind of been completely ruined. I'm an only child, so it's just me, my mum and my dad. I definitely saw my mum and dad as friends. My dad was a London taxi driver, he had been for 32 years. We'd recently moved to Weybridge. I'd just come back from university. I finished in the June, and I'd sort of been living at home. My dad usually goes to work around 1 in the afternoon, so just said goodbye, it was just normal. And then I went off to Bristol to celebrate a friend's 21st birthday. That family ended on that day, and now we have a different family. I got a call from my mum. The minute I answered the phone, I knew that there was something horribly wrong. It just sounded really weird. And she just said, Luce, try and think of the worst thing you can think of about Dad. And I kept saying, it can't be true. And she wasn't answering me. There was a drink driver in an Audi, and the Audi slammed into the back of the cab at 120 mile an hour. A third car then hit into him and they both died. But the drink driver was still alive and lived. When I first got home, obviously the cab had now disappeared, which seemed really odd. All of his shoes were still there, and his coats. It's just so abrupt. It's very hard to take that on board so violently, so quick. There's a constant sense of that there's someone missing, and there's something missing, particularly at my wedding. Obviously my mum had to be father of the bride as well as mother of the bride. There's this constant feeling of incomplete. I think it's just the smaller things as well, like every time I get a new job I feel sad because my dad doesn't know about it, and I know how pleased he'd be. I know that it won't stop now. It's constantly evolving, the loss, because when I have children, they won't have a granddad, and I'm going to have to always try to explain to them what he was like. This was one person's decision, one person's very poor decision, because it doesn't just stop with the initial devastating crash. The chain of events goes on and on and on. I mean, we're 6 years on, but my family is still so affected by it. And it's all down to one person deciding whether or not to be selfish and irresponsible, that my family's been completely ruined. My dad will be remembered as just a huge part of our lives, and as a great dad and a great husband. Just such a big loss.
Reflecting back on what Magda, our nurse, has just spoken to us about, what can you do to avoid being distracted by your mobile phone whilst driving your car? Put your phone on safe drive mode. This means that you will not be distracted and you can keep your focus on the road, keeping you and your passengers safe. It also means that anyone trying to get in contact with you will know that you are driving your car and that you will be in touch with them as soon as it is safe to do so. If you are caught using your mobile phone whilst driving, it is a £200 fine and you will have 6 points added to your licence. You will be disqualified from driving, losing your newfound freedom. The financial implications would be the cost of new lessons and a very large increase in the cost of your car insurance. However, the consequences of these are nothing compared to the human cost if you were to kill or seriously hurt somebody whilst driving your car. No one knows this better than our next speaker, Simone.
Hi, I'm Simone and this is my daughter's dog, Ruby. I've worked in horse racing in Epsom most of my life. 5 years ago, I lost my daughter Charlotte in a car crash, aged just 17 years old. She was a passenger and died at the scene, so I didn't get to say goodbye. Charlotte's father died when she was just 6 years old. He had committed suicide, but despite this, Charlotte was even more determined to become an apprentice jockey just like her dad. Charlotte had high expectations and was sticking to it. As a single mother, Charlotte would often come to the stables with me, and she would often play with the goats, the sheep, and a retired racehorse named Chakalak. When Charlotte was 7 years old, she asked my boss, Simon Dow, if she could learn to ride him. Simon agreed, and Charlotte had lots of fun riding on Epsom Downs. Charlotte attended the Priory School in Dorking, and during the summer holidays, weekends, she'd work at the stables in Epsom. And when Charlotte left school, she went on to the British Racing School at Newmarket. Charlotte was very determined to complete the course, and she was serious about the level of the fitness and riding, and despite it being hard work, she progressed very quickly to the CRS barn. Charlotte phoned me to say she had ridden Sheikh Mohammed's horses and Sheikh Fahid's horses. She was so happy that she was living her dream. Charlotte completed her 14-week course, and Sir Michael Stout congratulated her and gave her a certificate. Imagine how he felt when he learnt of her death 2 weeks later. He sent me the biggest bouquet of flowers. Also, Laura Mungan had offered Charlotte a place at her racing yard. Sadly, Charlotte only worked there for 2 weeks. Poor Laura had worked with Charlotte on that day, and Laura and the team were deeply affected. So on Sunday evening, the 26th of April 2015, Charlotte and her friends travelled to Worthing to collect the driver's riding boots, as he'd forgotten them. Charlotte texted me that evening to say that they were on their way home. At 2 a.m, the police turned up at my door to tell me the tragic news. I did not know how I was going to tell my parents that they had lost their beautiful granddaughter. As Charlotte was their first grandchild, she had an auntie and an uncle with 6 cousins whose lives have also been affected. Charlotte's friends found out through social media before I did. The next day, my phone was overloaded with messages from her friends as they couldn't believe it, and they thought it was a sick joke. This news affected her friends badly. I learnt later that 3 of them were on their way home, but stopped at McDonald's drive-thru. The driver met up with one of his friends, and they decided to race back to Epsom. Charlotte was a passenger in the car that was speeding. The driver lost control, hit an oncoming car. It somersaulted in the air and it hit a tree. Lottie died on impact of the oncoming car. She had broken her neck, and the other passenger had to be resuscitated 3 times as she was suffering cardiac arrest. She was on life support machine for a few months and suffered brain injuries. The driver suffered serious injuries but not life-threatening. The driver of the oncoming vehicle had serious injuries. Before going to court, I found out the other lad that was racing had driven back to the scene, and he tried to resuscitate Charlotte, but she was already dead from the broken neck. The driver got 1 count of causing death by dangerous driving and 2 counts of causing serious injury by dangerous driving. He got 5 years but only served 2.5 years in prison. Ruby was also affected too, as she was Charlotte's dog. She had sensed that something was wrong. She knew she often lay on Charlotte's bed crying, licking her pillow, and Ruby went off her food when Charlotte's friends came to visit. Also, she suffered anxiety and wouldn't let her friends go out the door, fearing that they wouldn't come back. Even today, she gets excited and cries if she hasn't seen a person for a long time, as she is happy to see them again. It affected me too. I suffer post-traumatic stress disorder. I couldn't drive for months because I suffer from panic attacks. I get anxious when I see teenagers in cars racing along. It upsets me seeing teenagers having fun, as Charlotte should be here enjoying life. It's hard talking to family as as well, as all I can talk about is Ruby and the weather. 5 years on, I try to be happy as my daughter wouldn't like to see me upset. Charlotte's friends still keep in touch with me today, and it makes me happy to see they've picked themselves up and are doing something with their lives. So please think about your actions when driving. 3 friends whose lives have been destroyed by one fatal crash. 1 19-year-old lad in prison, 1 17-year-old girl with life-changing injuries, and 1 17-year-old girl losing her life. I had the police give me back Charlotte's broken mobile phone, her shoes, her coat, her purse and her jewellery. So please don't do this to your loved ones. Safe drive, stay alive.
Let me try again. All these things I recognise. I remember delighting in them. Trees, art, house, music, pink morning sky, work well done, flowers, books. I still delight in them. I'm still grateful, but the zest is gone.
When I was 21, my dad was killed by a drunk driver, and it turned my world upside down.
The passion is cooled, the striving quietened, the longing stilled. My attachment is loosened. No longer do I set my heart on them. I can do without them. They just don't matter.
I was very easily led and I just wanted to be liked. And when I see my friends get into the car, I just kind of gave in to peer pressure and just got in.
Instead of rowing, I float. The joy that comes my way, I savour. But the seeking, the clutching, the aiming has gone.
In the car was the driver, passenger sat in front of me, and a close friend of mine sat next to me, who unfortunately died. As a passenger, always think about who's driving the car and what condition they're in. If you have any doubt, don't get in the car.
I don't suppose anyone on the outside notices. I go through my paces. What the world gives, I still accept. What it promises, I no longer reach for.
Please don't think you can drive dangerously without suffering the consequences.
I've become an alien in the world, shyly touching it as if it's not mine. I don't belong anymore. When someone loved leaves home, home becomes a mere house. My son James died because he was too tired. He fell asleep at the wheel and crashed into a bridge, which killed him instantly.
So we know driving tired can put you at a major risk of having a collision. Now, if when you're driving you feel tired, perhaps just pull over, take a break, maybe go and get a cup of coffee. It can be that easy to keep yourself safe. The crashes that I've seen over the years as a firefighter tell me that if you are tired when you're driving, you will not brake. You will not slow down or swerve. It doesn't matter what you hit, a tree, a bridge, a car, you will hit it at full force. Surely it is better to arrive a few minutes late and to get there safely. Now, we've talked a lot about driving and driver responsibilities, but as a passenger, the most bravest thing you may have to do is to turn around and say no to a lift home, to a driver or maybe a friend who is not safe to drive. Hopefully, our next speaker, Joe, will give you the strength you need to make that choice.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe. After being in a coma for 1 month and then in hospital ward for another month, I thought the day of my official discharge was the best news I'd ever heard. It has turned out to be quite the opposite. The day I left hospital, the struggles, the battles and the problems of being a backseat passenger in a fatal car accident have really begun. Sustaining a broken back and neck in 5 different places, fracturing my skull and contracting MRSA, pneumonia and meningitis have meant that I've needed constant care, appointments and help since the accident. So what happened? Well, I was walking home from a night out. I only had about a mile to walk, and some friends pulled over and asked if I wanted a lift. I jumped into the back of the car and away I went. We got onto a dual carriageway, and the next thing I know, I'm waking up after a 1 month long coma. I wasn't aware I'd received brain surgery or had broken my back and neck. I'd been told the driver lost control on the dual carriageway, smashed into the central reservation and flipped across the road and tumbled down the raised embankment. I was sat behind the front passenger, and it was my corner of the car that crashed, crumpled into a large tree. Being in hospital was the easy bit. Being fed and looked after all day, every day. What was not to love about this, however, was I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't even move my own fingers because of the traumatic brain injury I sustained and the broken back and neck. I was an 18-year-old semi-professional rugby player, loving every moment of life. However, the day I left hospital in a back brace and in a wheelchair was the day I thought my life was getting back together. I regularly get asked, hang on a minute, what's wrong with you? You look normal, right? You can clearly walk and talk. I'm not in a wheelchair, I have no obvious scars. However, that is the nature of a traumatic brain injury, the hidden disability. You guys would have no idea what I suffer from in terms of short-term memory loss, terrible concentration and significant attention problems. I suffer from chronic back pain from where the muscles and bones continue to struggle, mental and physical fatigue, as well as irritation and smell. Again, linked to the brain injury. The hardest thing is when people say, oh Joe, you've recovered incredibly well. I know it really upsets my family and my friends when they hear this. Yes, I am physically mobile and able to walk. However, the significant difficulties and irreparable damage lies beneath the surface. Since the accident, I've seen hospital experts of all kinds almost once a week. This has interfered with every aspect of my life. It got in the way of university, it continues to get in the way of my full-time job, but most upsettingly, continues to get in the way and obstruct my relationship with my friends and family. So, as I imagine a lot of you will be excited at the prospect of going to university, I clearly was when I was your age. The thought of going out, living with friends, being away from home, I know exactly what it's like. Before my crash, I was in exactly the same position as you guys sat, where you are now. I always thought I was going to be an audience member at presentations like this. Never did I envisage that I'd be the one talking. Please, please, never be where I am right now. My initial excitement of university before the accident was lost. The thought of going to uni when I was on my deathbed was the least of my parents' worries. So I got to uni and it was a struggle. Yes, I went out, yes, I had friends, and yes, I played sport. That's everything I signed up for. But you know what I didn't sign up for? The fact I had to go to hostel every week. I had to see the disabled students tutor every week. I had to see my geography tutor every week. I had to see a care expert every week. I had to wear a back brace for the whole year of my first year. I just wanted to be a normal student after all. Needless to say, when I slipped over playing sport and the alarm bells went off and I had to go to extensive tests in the hospital, how's that for just being a 20-year-old at uni? I was more dependent on other people than I was at any other aspect of my life. And then there were those moments when my mind wanders, when I've lost my concentration at work, or walking to a friend's house, or even when I'm lying in bed and I can't sleep. These moments happen every single day. Every day I think about the crash, the fact I lost a close friend. She was sat right next to me in the car. Those moments I wonder how much my life would be so different if the crash never happened. Those moments I just wish things were different. I ask myself every single day, why is it my family and friends have to suffer for the mistake I made? The mistake I made was getting into a car at 2 a.m. after a night out and accepting a lift from a girl from my school who was drunk. That has been, and will always be, the biggest mistake of my life. That one poor moment of poor judgment from myself to accept a lift. I was only going a mile down the road. I didn't think that it would only cost approximately £4 or £5 in a cab. I didn't think it would only be a 20-minute walk. 20 minutes. That one moment of poor judgment from the driver to pick up her keys and to get behind the wheel. That one moment has changed my life. It has shaped and defined everything I do. That one moment has also killed one of my closest friends who I sat next to. Upon impact, my close friend split her spinal cord in half. That one moment has changed my life, taken the life of another and ruined the life of the driver. Make sure that moment doesn't happen to you and make sure you are never in my position. So please, this is my challenge to you. Please make a promise to yourself. By doing so, you'll be making a promise to your parents, to your friends, to the guys you're sat next to right now, and even a promise to me. When you get into a car and have a look around, make sure you're 100% certain that this is the safest option. There are always alternatives. I have no doubt that some stage in your lives, almost certainly in the next few years, you will be in this situation. Don't think about what's convenient or what the quickest way is. Before you step into the car, think about the sensible option. Think about your family, and please, please, think about what the safest way is. Please. Safe drive, stay alive.
Just for us, compare how you feel now to how you felt when we started. Do you feel the same as you did, or has something you've heard today made you think differently about what it takes to be safe on the roads as a young driver or passenger? Right at the start, Andy and I told you why we are so passionate about bringing you Safe Drive Stay Alive this year, despite COVID. Hopefully now those reasons are clear. We want to avoid a police officer like Steve walking up your drive and telling your mum and dad that you're not coming home. Drive home safely within the speed limit, making sure you complete your journey. We don't want a team of firefighters, a team like Rachel's, having to cut you or all your friends out of a vehicle because someone has been driving under the influence of drugs. We want you to choose carefully who you get into the car with. And we'd like you to not need to receive the emergency medical treatment from a paramedic like James in your car, buried in some woods, and not being able to save your life because your injuries are just so severe. Help them save your life on your way home. And if you're tired, pull over somewhere safe and take a break. We don't want you to be responsible for you or someone else coming under the care of Magda in an emergency hospital situation, like the driver texting on her mobile phone, hitting that poor little boy. Put that mobile away in the glove box, perhaps before you drive, and avoid the distraction. We'd like you to consider how you want to feel. Feel good about driving safely. Don't be racked with guilt for causing someone's injury or death. We want you to stay safe as a passenger, learning from Joe's experiences by checking that the driver is fit to drive, not affected by drugs or alcohol. Choosing to walk or take a taxi home, or even better, planning your journeys in advance. But if not for us, think about your mums, your dads, the people who look after you and love you. I'm sure they're great, but I don't want to meet them as part of this Safe Drive Stay Alive team. Like Simone, who shared a very personal story about the loss of daughter Charlotte due to others driving at excessive speed. Simone, like all our other speakers, has shared her story in the hope that you take on board what is being said and take your responsibilities seriously. We want your parents to be happy in the knowledge that you will get home safely. We really care, we really do care, and we just want to make the right choices, help you make those choices to be safe on the roads and not just become another killed or seriously injured statistic. So we have a few things to help make you remember us and the messages from today to help making you continue to make some good choices.
Teachers, tutors, you can order free copies of the Young Driver's Guide for all of your students by emailing safedrive at surreycc.gov.uk. The guide includes lots of information and guidance for learner and novice drivers, including how to choose a driving instructor, car insurance options, car maintenance, driving laws and car safety. You can also download a follow-up tutor resource pack from our website www.safedrivesurrey.org to use in your classroom follow-up discussion sessions. We also have locker coin key rings like this one. Use it when you go to the gym, stick your car keys on it. It's got our Safe Drive Stay Alive logo on it so that every time you drive, you will think back to today. Think about what you've seen and heard, remembering how you feel right now and reminding you of your responsibilities when you get in a car as a driver and a passenger. Teachers, the key rings can also be ordered by emailing safedrive@surreycc.gov.uk. Just let us know how many of the young driver guides and key rings you would like.
Driving brings a freedom and lots of opportunities. We'd all like you to enjoy these, but also embrace the responsibilities that come with them, which will help make you safer drivers and passengers. Remember to register for further information and a chance to win one of 30 great prizes. Simply text the word WIN to 87222. That's WIN to 87222. You need to text before the end of November for a chance to win, and we can then keep in touch, sending you important information, advice and guidance about driving and being safe on the roads. If you have been affected or bereaved by a road traffic collision, you can call the helpline, the charity road piece, on 0845 4500 355. And their contact details are also available online.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to show your appreciation to the speakers who have shared their personal life stories with you, or leave some feedback about the performance, we would welcome your comments. You can leave them on YouTube. You'll get the link after texting WIN to 87222. So thanks again. Take care and remember, safe drive, stay alive.